Blizzard seem to have confirmed a leveling Squish, leading to speculation that it will come along with something altogether rather larger indeed. So, today there is a lot to talk about. Hey everyone and welcome back to the news, and damn, this week has been really topical, with Blizzard issuing a survey that seemingly, well, teases an utterly massive change to the game, so that's pretty wild, and then past that, Vulpera might be looking pretty darn likely, and we have a few other things to break down, including just where patch 8.2 could actually be. First though, a big shout out to our Patreon supporters. Yeah, we've just got our next lore video posted over there, in fact, and yeah, of course, for the physical tier this month, we're shifting over to Shaman, so you get these two guys, final sticker, $25 with shipping included, and with YouTube maybe having other demonetization wave and all that stuff, yeah, it's really supported indeed. So a big thank you to them, and let's get into this Blizzard survey. So, this rather wild Blizzard survey, it appears to have been rather limited because not all questions made it onto the internet, but those that have actually been very impactful indeed, as we both see Blizzard confirm a leveling Squish and also talk about the pricing of the level 120 boost. So here's how the question read. Are you aware that the maximum level of 120 will be reduced in the future, i.e. level Squish? No. Nobody announced that. This is a complete surprise. In fact, it seems like departments within Blizzard just haven't been talking to each other because, to be very clear, this has been announced nowhere by Blizzard officially. They have at no point said that it will be implemented, bar this survey. Blizzard have talked about the idea. Game Directory and his hostess said that they were very much floating the idea internally, but that they were undecided. So, hearing that this is going to be coming to the game, well, that is quite a surprise indeed. And I did make a video earlier that was fairly anti-level Squish, but the core point of that video is worth re-clarifying because I think a lot of people did hop out of that video pretty early. So that my point was that decreasing the number of levels doesn't really solve the core progression problems of the game that much. Right, like, so if you have the game's total number of experience and hours be the same, but you have the number of levels, with each level being twice as long, you're essentially left with the same thing, with the only difference being that a higher percentage of your dings come with a new ability or a talent point, which certainly is a good thing, but overall I don't think it's massively transformative. If they are to do a leveling Squish, then I think that should be a part of a far broader revamp to the game's leveling process. I mean, a really quick and dirty way of making each ding feel better would just be to give players a bag of loot each level, but I think that would feel pretty cheap. Now, in my previous video, I did float some ideas for talent revamps, including one that would work alongside the game's current style of talents, as well as then one that was a separate class-based progression system that would be far less about throughput and far more about like ability, utility and interesting things. Something similar to the mastery system of Guild Wars 2. Indeed, something that Blizzard could easily expand into endgame and then also use to reinforce class fantasy. It's pretty simple though. If Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor are just level 1 to 30, Outland and Northrend are maybe 30 to 35, Cata and Mop are 35 to 40, WoDs maybe 40 to 50, Legions 50 to 60, and BFA 60 to 70, well, I mean, I just don't think it would change that much, right? The next expansion would just boop you up to level 80 anyway, and you still have the cut down number of talents. I think what matters more here is the design changes that could come with the level Squish. So I think that they've already laid good foundations. I think the 7.3.5 combat rebalance and scaling really was a good move overall, but I think they do need to work out how to capitalize on that better gameplay. But let's put on the tinfoil hat for a second. The soonest this change could happen is the next expansion. Well, if in that next expansion, like the thing that kicks us off is us unleashing the Black Empire, as seems to be N'Zoth's plan, well, what if that would result in another reshuffle of the world? Almost like a small version of the Cataclysm revamp. Or maybe something even like the Cataclysm revamp. I mean, being real, the World of Warcraft team, the development team, is far larger than it was during Cataclysm development, and when you look at Nazjatar, you do see a lot of asset reuse from Azuna and things like that, so perhaps they have a lot of their art resources shifted over to something big for the next expansion. Perhaps that will greatly redefine how leveling works in World of Warcraft. I mean, perhaps they'll just squish us to level 60 and then just stop adding new levels with new expansions. Maybe they'll carve a different path forward. After all, right now with World of Warcraft, endgame sort of is the game, and they might end up redoubling on that. I suppose they might feel that for many people, the quest content that comes with an expansion is just blasted through as a chore. What if there was more stuff framed like Suramar being an opt-in endgame narrative activity? Well, you know, maybe bar having to do Suramar to unlock the dungeons, but you get my point. So essentially a new expansion giving you zones to explore with their own rewards and stories, and maybe giving you some sort of infinitely filling XP bar that maybe gives you mastery points like the Guild Wars system. I mean, it's kind of hard to know what would work best overall. That type of design is extremely hard for them to do based on the amount of external class mechanics that the game has. A new set of 10 levels for Blizzard essentially means that, you know, you lose your artifacts and then you've got a power reset for the next expansion. And that's kind of core to how they do expansion to expansion transitions. As controversial as the loss of the artifacts and the gameplay impacts of that ended up being, I'm not sure if Blizzard would feel comfortable going fully into the other direction. I mean, Guild Wars 2 is by no means a perfect game, and as much as I do sit here and say that it sometimes has good ideas, I don't play it, and that probably does tell you something. So, what I'd like to know is, what do you think a leveling revamp in World of Warcraft should do? What should it look like? And more importantly, what changes would you like to see go along with it? What do you think would result in a better leveling system that would just, you know, be better for the game, better for the new player experience, all that stuff? Now, the surveys also did mention some other things. There were questions regarding people's preferences of classic beta versus live in terms of their viewing habits, what content they wanted to watch, such as, you know, streamers playing classic or live, arena, MDI, live raids, things like that, as well as a question covering which streamers people actually liked. Blizzard, of course, for a long time have been very stream focused. Definitely they're a lot more into streaming than they are into YouTube, and I think that's mostly down to the ratio of essentially viewers to engagement that you get on Twitch. One question that did catch my interest a lot, though, was the level boost. So they asked feedback on whether a $40 boost that saved 120 hours would be worth it. That's interesting, as it would be $20 cheaper than the current boost price, and that's very much something that reinforces how Blizzard see the boost, as being time per dollar. And I think that is how players see the boost as well. Reducing the price increases the number of hours saved per dollar spent, just like how raising the time to level also increases the hours saved per dollar spent. It's all about fine-tuning that to really hit maximum profitability, which, I mean, does make sense. After all, they're a business selling a product. They can do what they want. It's up to consumers to, you know, accept or reject that. Now, the lingering question is whether that sort of thing has a degenerate effect on the design of the game. It is the case that the 735 changes increase leveling times. I do think that those changes made the game better, but as the survey question shows you, it does sort of alter the level boost value proposition to be a little bit more attractive. Does Ian get orders to elongate leveling by 20% to sell more boosts? I mean, he could, but very likely not, in my opinion, which is seemingly why this question is being targeted at price point, which is the other tuning knob of that sort of value equation that they can tweak. Changing it to $40 would mean that sales would have to increase by about 33% in order for them to make the same amount of money, but the thing is, because they would just be shifting more product that way, they would be making the same amount of money by burning through the potential market faster, by which I mean people who want to boost characters will have boosted their characters with the discount, reducing the size of the, you know, potential boost market. Now, Blizzard probably has the numbers to know that that will not happen, and what they're trying to do is work out, will that 33% price cut actually lead to 33% more sales? And obviously, they'd want a lot more than just the 33% boost. Of course, this does make a lot of sense in the broader context of Blizzard needing to get as much revenue in as they can. It has been an extremely quiet time for them. World of Warcraft won't have another release for a year, over a year, and then at the same time, Overwatch 2 PvE and Diablo 4, while they almost certainly will be announced at BlizzCon, they're probably still a year or two off, so it is definitely a sort of quiet time for the company. Now, speaking of a buttload of money, it's time to break out the fursuits because we are talking about the Vulpera. They may have sort of been accidentally leaked again. This is pointed out by Wowhead, and if true, well, it wouldn't be as bad as Battle for Azeroth being leaked via an armor model literally being the 7.3 PTR, but it would be, you know, quite the spicy little leak. So what happened? Well, a cinematic config file that was listing playable race IDs happened to include Vulpera. And yes, it was there, it was in the file, and it was down as an allied race, but it is worth taking this in context. It's just a variable in a file, right? just because it exists doesn't actually mean that it's being used, and it could have just been an internal joke or a mistake. It by no means is a hard confirmation that Vulpera are coming to the game, though it kind of does suggest it because it does also come after a Vulpera Brewfest icon was found, so it's hardly in isolation as a data point for us to look at. As for why I mentioned money, well, I mean, that was just me being a bit pithy, but Blizzard obviously do make a lot of money from race transfers, which gives them a very strong incentive to keep on adding allied races to the game. Indeed, Blizzard's additional game transactions really seem to have picked up the slack as of late, with World of Warcraft being one of Activision Blizzard's best performers. I mean, Blizz PR, they actually did tell me once that they wished that I referred to the game's health as not just being measured in subscribers, obviously meaning that it's measured in revenue, which is why the other optional MTX is a lot more important to them. And I kind of told them, like, oh yeah, I mean, we all know that, but it doesn't exactly look good for you, does it? So that was a bit funny, but I think it is the case. A race transfer, $25. That's 2.5 months of subscription, and it's also the type of thing that is targeting the same type of audience who are already highly engaged in the optional purchases through things like the store mounts. So it very much is a highly effective way to more deeply monetize the cosmetics-driven audience of World of Warcraft. After all, yeah, you could appeal to the mechanically focused gamers who are going to criticize you till the cows come home, or you could just double down on catering to the people who have proven to have a very high conversion rate in the past. I think from the working out the arithmetic over at Blizz, they're probably going to do the latter. It's all very interesting, though, to talk about. I think business is just generally interesting, and I suppose just the examination of incentives. Now, Vulpera were the only new allied race in this file, so it does make me wonder, would they be added as a neutral allied race rather than Horde only? Though I suppose they could give us the Ankoan for the Alliance, who are a new 8.2 race, and then they could give the Horde Vulpera and do that at the same time. But, mentioning the Ankoan, let's just talk about where patch 8.2 actually is. So this is something that Taliesin called into question in the weekly reset last week, the timelines of patch 8.2, because that patch certainly has been in the oven for quite some time indeed. Now, I did a video on this a good while ago, plotting out the relative patch-to-patch times for every patch since Legion, as well as speculative dates for 8.2. Dates that seem to pretty much be on the mark, as it turns out. So Legion patches were, for the bulk of that expansion's life, spaced 68 days apart. Well, with BFA, things have been really quite different. So back in that video, I said this. From Legion launch to patch 7.2 was 210 days. From Legion launch to 7.3 was 365 days. Assuming a 25th of June release date, BFA launch to patch 8.2 launch would be 310 days. So that means that, relatively speaking, patch 8.2 is closer to patch 7.3 in terms of its relative timing from the expansion launch, which kind of does show you that Blizzard are decently behind schedule when it comes to patch 8.2. So that's what I said in that video, and I suppose the question is, will it actually be the 25th of June? Is that when we can expect it? Well, I think that's totally possible, with it coming down to this. How much do Blizz want to compete with Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers? Do they want to launch to compete with its early access or its launch? Because early access is June 28th, so launching 8.2 the preceding Tuesday would compete with the early access. Alternatively, the 2nd of July is a Tuesday, so they could coincide the patch release date with Shadowbringers expansion release date. Now, Blizzard developers over time have said that they don't do this, but it's like, lads, I've got a calendar. Heavensward, that released on the 23rd of June 2015, the same day Blizz released patch 6.2. Stormblood released on the 20th of June. Blizzard released the Tomb of Sargeras on the 20th of June. And then in the past, they matched the release date of Wildstar and Guild Wars 2 with major in-game events. So regardless of what Blizzard say, it is actually what they do. So expect to see 8.2 launch, I'd say, on the 2nd of July or the 25th of June. Then, and I guess slightly getting onto what Tali was talking about, with Classic doing so well on Twitch and a lot of engagement there for World of Warcraft, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't feel the pressure to rush it out. After all, their internal QA department, from what I heard, was really slain by the layoff wave earlier on this year, and I don't know if it's back up to speed yet. Regardless, it clearly has not been good for the health of BFA for the live game. I mean, from my own personal experience, knowing that 8.2 is coming, well, and I just knew that, like, from the PTR, that 8.2 is way better than 8.1 and what came before it, so I've not touched World of Warcraft live in months other than the PTR. It just felt pointless to me because 8.2 is clearly superior in just about every way and will replace my character's current progress, so there's no point in me playing the game until 8.2 comes out, and I can do Mechagon and Agitar, which I actually do want to do. So yeah, there you go. It certainly is an interesting time for World of Warcraft with Classic, with 8.2 finally being on the horizon, and I suppose for me the main question is, given how long we had to wait for 8.2, Will we see 8-3 along the regular timescale, or will it also be a fair bit off in comparison to what Legion would have had us expect? So I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say about all of this, and that is it for this week's World of Warcraft news. So let me know what you think is going on outside of the game and inside of the game. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.